I'll go read out a BBC report on the latest regarding the Gaza ceasefire. Of course, any decent person should welcome this. If it really is peace, that's a good thing. I welcome it, but I'm a little cautious. Just because the history of the Middle East shows that things can fall through, and I feel there's a sense of, perhaps perhaps premature celebration, because until this is finalised, it could still fall flat. It is not set in stone. I think Trump has personally been frustrated with Netanyahu. Even up to the last minute, Netanyahu's warplanes were bombing Gaza. Um, I think Trump's personally angry with Benjamin Netanyahu, like he has been with Putin. And he's furious that he hasn't got the Nobel Peace Prize. That's gone to the Venezuelan opposition leader. I'll be making a video specifically on her win. I think it's well deserved. I think it just is indicative of Trump's personality that he reacts that way. So I'm going to read this in a second. Just a quick thing on Trump. There's some other news going on, I should say briefly. There's been an explosion in Tennessee, up to 19 people missing, apparently at some sort of explosives plant. And France, Sebastian Lecornu has been reappointed as Prime Minister by Emmanuel Macron. I guess the concept of having a seventh Prime Minister would just be too much, and it would probably push the Macron presidency over the edge. So anyway, this was today's headlines. I've got one left, one right-wing perspective, i.e. the I and the Daily Express. You see the angle the Express is taking it. The Express, I have to say, unlike some right-wing papers, has at least covered the Palestinian suffering. They had a very, very glaring headline recently showing a starving child. The Daily Telegraph, by contrast, has barely touched on the Palestinian suffering. I think their coverage has been appalling, just in its sheer extreme bias towards Israel. But without further ado, I'm just going to read out the report about the latest. Of course, this is welcome, but like I say, I just have a little bit of caution until it's finalised. Okay. This report's by Alice Davies. The Israeli military says it has partially withdrawn troops from parts of Gaza after a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas came into effect on Friday morning. Israeli forces said they had pulled back to an agreed position within the territory, though troops still occupy half of the strip. Footage shows thousands of Palestinians making their way to the north of Gaza, which has been heavily bombarded by Israeli forces in recent months. The ceasefire came into effect after the Israeli government approved the first phase of US President Donald Trump's ceasefire and hostage return deal on Thursday. The next phases are still being negotiated. Under the deal, Hamas has until 12 o'clock local time, that's 10 o'clock British Standard Time, on Monday to release all Israeli hostages, including 20 are believed to be alive, and up to 28 hostages remains. Israel should also release about 250 Palestinian prisoners serving life sentences in Israeli jails. Israeli army radio said 100 will be released into the West Bank and 5 to East Jerusalem, more expected to be deported. A further 1,700 Palestinians from Gaza who have been detained should also be released. Under the terms of the deal, aid trucks should be allowed unrestricted into the strip to bring desperately needed aid to Gaza's population, many of whom have been repeatedly displaced during the 2-year war. Around 600 aid trucks are expected to enter Gaza daily from Friday, though details of the rollout remains unclear and it has not been confirmed whether any increased aid has reached people since the ceasefire began. A famine was declared in parts of the territory for the first time in August by UN-backed experts who said more than 500,000 people were facing catastrophic conditions characterised by starvation, destitution and death. Israel has repeatedly denied that there's starvation in the territory, and that's a barefaced lie, that's my words. Eyewitnesses in Gaza said troops had pulled back from the northwestern outskirts of Gaza City towards the east. In the south, some Israeli troops were also reported to have pulled back from the Khan Yunis area. In a statement on social media, the Israeli Defense Forces said its troops began positioning themselves along the updated deployment lines from 12 o'clock local time. IDF troops in the Southern Command are deployed in the area and will continue to remove any immediate threat, the statement said. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said US Central Command had confirmed IDF troops had completed their first phase withdrawal to what he referred to as the Yellow Line. The line was featured in a map released by the White House last week, marking where troops will withdraw to during this phase of the ceasefire agreement, where it will control 53% of Gaza. Just to continue the report. I think all the details here matter, so bear with me. The 72-hour time period to release the hostages has begun, Witkoff added. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a televised address he was fulfilling the promise to bring back all the hostages. He added Israeli troops were still surrounding Hamas from every direction, adding the next stages of Trump's plan are that Hamas will be disarmed and Gaza will be demilitarized. Hamas has not made any pledge to disarm at this point. Earlier on Friday, there was some confusion around the timings of when the ceasefire was implemented. Eyewitnesses told BBC airstrikes continued in Gaza into the early hours of Friday. The Hamas-run health ministry said 17 people have been killed in the past 24 hours. The IDF said it would continue to operate from its updated deployment lines to remove any immediate threat and urged people to avoid entering areas still under Israeli military control. In areas of Gaza City where the IDF had withdrawn, Hamas security forces were deployed to the streets. They were pictured wearing caps with the logo of the Hamas Internal Security Agency rather than a regular police force. As troops partially withdrew, thousands of Palestinians were filmed travelling, many on foot, up Gaza's coastal road to the north. I think that's become a familiar image in this recently. Many were travelling on foot for more than 20 kilometres, travelling what remained of their belongings on their backs. Along the damaged narrow road, some waved Palestinian flags and flashed victory signs, but many also appeared weak and malnourished. And there's footage here, photos just showing hollow, shelled out buildings. It looks like Damascus and Aleppo did a few years ago. The road is long and difficult. There's no food or water, said Alaa Saleh, a school teacher who fled Gaza City with his wife and 6 children to Khan Yunis in the south. I left my family behind and started walking north. Thousands around me are struggling. Hiring a car costs around 4,000 shekels. That's £924, far beyond what most people can afford, he told the BBC. Wael al-Najjar, who's making his way to his hometown of in Jabalia in the north, said he had slept outside in the cold pavement with his son waiting to be able to start his journey home. He told a BBC freelancer, even if the house is destroyed, even if it's just rubble, we'll go back, put up a tent and return to our people. Many in the road were aiming for Gaza City, much of which has been turned to rubble. Videos circulating online show fast waves of destruction in the city's main neighbourhoods, including Sheikh Radwan in the north and Sabra and Sutun to the south and east, where entire apartment blocks have been levelled. Gaza's civil defence crews have been recovering bodies from beneath the ruins, while aid agencies have warned that essential supplies like food, fuel and clean water remain critically scarce. In Israel, families of those held hostage in Gaza rejoice at the news of the ceasefire. Yuri Gorin, who has been campaigning since the 7th of October 2023 for the return of his cousin's body after Tal Haimi was killed and taken by Hamas 2 years ago, said he allowed himself a big sigh of relief when he heard about the ceasefire's agreement. But his relief was tempered by Hamas's admission that they don't know the whereabouts of all the dead hostages' bodies. This will not end until all 48 are back home, he stressed. Of course, those who've died will need to be reunited with their loved ones to have a proper burial. Israel's war on Gaza was triggered by the Hamas-led attacks in southern Israel on the 7th of October 2023, in which about 1,200 people were killed and 251 taken hostage. Since then, more than 67,000 Palestinians have been killed, including more than 18,000 children, the Hamas-run health ministry says. The UN Commission of Inquiry and leading experts have accused Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza during the course of the war. Israel has categorically rejected the report, denouncing it as distorted and false. Now, I don't know how anyone can't say that report's balanced. The BBC's often been attacked by both sides. That report is just presenting the facts. So, it's welcome news. Incidentally, it says 1,200 Israeli casualties. It's probably about 1,300 when we include troops that have been killed and incidents since then, like the attack in Jerusalem recently. But vastly more Palestinians, 67,000 people. So we're talking here about a conflict, a 2-year conflict that's killed up to 70,000 people. And there are deadlier wars in the world, actually. In Sudan and Ethiopia, for instance, the figures associated with those conflicts are significantly higher, and in Ukraine. But this is by far the deadliest conflict in the Holy Land since Israel's foundation in 1948. It's an awful situation, and it's unlike any other conflict, even Ukraine. It has galvanized strong sentiments around the world. I'm just going to briefly put in summary my thoughts on it. Like any normal person, I was horrified by the attacks on October the 7th. I mean, this was largely targeting Israeli civilians. Some horrific massacres in the kibbutz areas and at the music festival. And I can only imagine the nightmare the families of those hostages have been through, and the hostages themselves, in horrendous conditions. But I still maintain that Israel's gone way, way, way over self-defense. And I think Netanyahu's government has went into this only partially with a sight of getting hostages back. I think it's about collective punishment. Because even when Hamas commanders have been killed, even when they spread the war into Lebanon, and those figures aren't including the 4,000 killed in Lebanon, they still continued bombarding and bombarding and bombarding every single day. Dozens of civilians killed. And it's absolutely a humanitarian crisis. It's a cruel, cruel lie for Israel to claim otherwise. I think what's happened is initial goodwill towards Israel has vastly dissipated from Western countries outside of the United States. And that's entirely of Israel's own making. The fact that it attacked Qatar recently, yes, Hamas has a presence in Qatar, but that was thoroughly reckless, I think, of Netanyahu. I hope this really is an end of it. But briefly on Trump, lobbying for the Nobel Peace Prize, I'm going to be making a video on the actual laureate because I think she deserves a video of her own. But the ego of Donald Trump. But you know what? Even if he deserves credit for some of this, and he was not alone, let's not forget Egypt, Turkey and Qatar are also responsible for this. So shouldn't their representatives also get a Nobel Peace Prize? Anyway, even if Trump deserves some credit for this, the fact of the matter is, American weapons have directly killed thousands of Palestinian civilians. There's just no way around it. And yes, so have British weapons, but it's on a scale that's much, much, much smaller. Or at least British funding to Israel, but it's on a much smaller scale. I welcome this. I really hope it will stick, but what happens long term? Now, Hamas is ostensibly going to be replaced by some sort of authority. What form will that take? Will they renounce anti-Semitic genocidal manifestos? Will Israel take a different direction? Because Netanyahu is a hawk who has plunged his country into global isolation. Some of the far-right members of his cabinet have really escalated things. Settler violence has escalated things. I mean, again, the figures may or may not include the 600 killed in the West Bank. So, I welcome it. Of course I do, and I hope it lasts. But I really don't think Trump should have got the Nobel Peace Prize when he has been directly responsible for Palestinian civilian deaths by blind support for Israel. I mean, the American position is so biased to Israel that you can't divorce those two things. Even if Trump's been frustrated with Netanyahu at times. I cannot forget the sick proposition that Trump made to turn Gaza into real estate. I mean, it's sociopathic. So anyway, we'll see how this plays out. I really hope it sticks. Because, my God, people there have suffered so much on both sides, but particularly the Palestinians. I do genuinely sympathise with Israeli families, wondering about the fate of their loved ones. And those people that come out, they're going to need probably years of therapy and rehabilitation. It's a horrendous experience they've been through. But it's also a horrendous experience for innocent Palestinians who've been displaced, who've been bombed, who've had their entire families wiped out. The great irony of this is, young men are going to be radicalized. This sort of collective punishment approach Israel has taken will only make it more hated in the region. And I don't welcome that. I hope there could be peace in the Middle East, but history just has a tendency to repeat itself there. And we always hear about Israel's right to defend itself. What about the Palestinians' right to defend themselves when they're being bombarded by Israeli warplanes? This is no justification of Hamas and their deliberate targeting of civilians. But I still maintain that there are Israel apologists who basically have a racist attitude to this. They basically deem Palestinian lives to be worth less. And that's despicable. So it's welcome news overall, but it's with the sobering fact that so many innocents have died. So many children. It's going to take probably decades to rebuild the Gaza Strip. So it's a good thing if the violence is over for now, but we'll see how far this goes. But if you're really going to argue that Trump deserves it for American diplomatic efforts, then you should argue that so does Turkey, so does Qatar, and so does Egypt. It wasn't the White House alone that has done this. And it's down to Netanyahu and Hamas, frankly, to see if this lasts. If Hamas doesn't step down, if they don't renounce their genocidal policy towards the Jewish state, then we will unfortunately see things escalating again. And if Netanyahu's far-right cabinet doesn't change the direction, we'll see things escalating again. But the fact of the matter is, Israel has been isolated by its extreme collective punishment approach. I went from sympathising with Israel to being very critical of what they're doing. I just don't accept that Palestinian children are collateral damage, that ghastly term, collateral damage. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but it's welcome, but that welcome should be taken with some caution. Until this is finalised, until all the hostages are out, until Israel has left Gaza, then it's, I think there should be some degree of caution.